Okay, so it's been about an hour. So what I'm going to do is I've just done a little test here. So we're going to try it because it's been about an hour. If you use the Decoupage image transfer medium, it's harder than the Decoupage original. So decided to, because I used the actual photo transfer medium, I'm going to try it a little bit earlier. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to wet this bottom corner. This is a good way to test it. Of course, don't do this yet if your surface is still, like if you're still sticky. If you did use the decoupage and this is all still sticky, then we're going to let it sit a little bit longer. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to wet this corner. So I'm taking my brush and I'm just going to soak it a little bit. And you can actually see up close, where is that? Come on, right in there. You can actually see the letters are sort of showing through a little bit. So we're just going to test that spot. And I'm just going to take my finger and rub it. And what you should see is the letter staying put. So that you can see the R has stayed. A little bit of paper residue. We're not going to worry about that too much. So there, it depending 1 to 2 hours. I wouldn't let it sit much more than that. You don't need to. So we're going to actually just go with a bigger spot now. And we're going to wet the entire bottom. And I'm actually going to show you something that's really kind of funny. Where this spot right here, where it's white, that's where I got decoupage medium actually on the paper. So it's going to be a little harder to get that little spot off. But that, you know, we're not going to worry about it. And just because I am still working, I didn't want to do the whole area just in case some of it isn't dry. We'll start, and we're just going to rub it with our fingers very lightly. Don't scrub at it. Sometimes you can use a rag. I prefer to use my fingers. And just keep rubbing. You can see the letters are starting to come out. This is actually looking really good. But once you start to rub too hard, and this is what sets it apart from, you know, whether it sits now or it sits, you know, overnight or how much longer, is if I keep rubbing, I can actually pull a little bit of the black ink off. So because this has only been an hour, I'm actually going to actually let it sit now for another half an hour. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do another piece. Just that the harder it is and the longer it sets, the less chance you have of pulling off some of the black. But when I'm not worried about those little bits that do come off. So we're just going to let it sit a little bit longer, so about half an hour. So and then we'll be back to test it some more. Okay, so it's been an extra half an hour, so we're basically going on an hour, 45 minutes to 2 hours, just depending on how much time, you know, how much coffee you wanted to drink, whatever, you know, how much time you got stuck on Facebook, haven't you got into Pinterest or something. So anyway, so we're going to continue to wet this, and we're just going to soak it basically with my brush, the same brush that I was using for everything else. And you can see it starts to dry. So basically what happens is you do get a film, the paper film that shows up, so you can just take that off once it's wet again, because it does take 2 or 3 times. This is coming off a lot better. So like I had said before, that if you are, you know, rubbing your paper off and you're finding you're taking up too much of the black, you're either one, it's you've waited not long enough and it needs to dry a little bit more, or you're pressing too hard. You don't want to press too hard. We're going to do this 2 or 3 times to get this paper off. And that way that you do have time, you know, because as it dries you will see a little bit of a paper film. There we go. Much better. So we're going to rub this off, and this is why we suddenly have no fingerprints. And we can go witness protection. So soaking that, using my fingers. Some people do use a rag. You can dampen a rag and use it. I find that I just don't have the control of the rag, but it's not to say that it won't work for you. A lot of people do. Look at that. We're starting to see our witching hour already. I love this. Take your little papers off. This is the messy part because these little papers actually get everywhere. You think you catch them all, but you find them a week later. It's like glamour dust. They're gone, but they're not really gone. You find them in the strangest places. Okay, so we're wetting that last bit. And of course, see these darker white spots? That's where I did get a little bit of the image transfer medium on my paper. If you lose a little spot here and there, you know, like that little spot down here, We can touch it up with black paint. So if you lose a little spot here and there, don't panic. It's not the end of the world. It becomes part of the design. Besides this old piece, right? Use a little bit of black paint. Just keep wetting it a little bit. You don't want it totally, you know, water running off your paper, but you do want it to be able to get this top coat off. Work in small sections. You'll notice like here, like around the clock edge and stuff, where you've got finer details, that's where you're going to notice that you may have some lifting. Don't panic. As you can see throughout this whole video, we don't panic. Maybe you ought to drink, you know, drink a lot of coffee, you would think that I would be, you know, borderline panicking for everything, but no, no. Okay, so we're gonna clean this off so that we can go back to our next coat. Take my little rag. Get rid of the worst part of that. Now, just for fun, I'm going to show you actually that, you know, using a rag, the difference is not much difference. Like I said, a lot of people do. Let's get your rag wet. You get a wet rag, and you can just gently rub. You know, think of it as washing the baby's face, you know. You don't want to scrub their little faces off, but just gently. And see, it's all starting to come off. The little bit of paper does dry, you do see it, but you know, we're going to do something about that. There are ways. Varnish actually, when the end of the day, when the whole project is finished, varnish will actually stop that white from continuously showing up. But I'll show you a little trick, because I don't like it when the white paper shows up. I find it really annoying. I'm anal that way. If you're on a white background, it doesn't matter, you won't see the paper. If you had a dark background, then you do tend to see a little bit more of the paper. So we're just going to scrub this. I'm going to wipe it off again. How cool is that, eh? How cool is that? Look at that, it's awesome. I still get excited when it works. So actually, as that dries, you will actually see the white paper. Right? This is so awesome. Wasn't that fun? You can breathe now. I know you've held your breath the whole time that we've been doing this, but you can breathe now. So there. We have scrubbed. Wash your little face. Right. So we're going to let that dry, and we will come back and I'll show you how we're going to get rid of the white, and then we're going to start painting. Okay, so we're back, and he's had plenty of time to dry. So now you can see that we do have this little bit of white residue here. I'm not even going to worry about it right now. There were different things that we can do. I think we'll start with one of the little things that I do is I will do a bit of a wash. So I'm going to take a little bit of my Payne's Gray, the background color, and we're going to do a little something here. Because sometimes you may have a little bit more residue than you probably like. A little, you know, some of you could be freaking out. I know I freak out a little bit if there's too much white. So what I actually do is I'm actually going to take my big old brush here and water, and I'm actually just going to add a little bit of the background, the Payne's Gray color in a wash. And this is when I do a wash, this is all I'm going to end up with is just a very, like a hint of color. Just enough to kind of tint and wet that white a little bit. I'm just going to go over it. And see, it's like a magic eraser. It's really kind of cool. Just got to go over your piece. Try not to get too much color. Just leave it as a little bit of a hint. What it's doing actually is coloring the paper. So the little bit of white is now going to be like a blue. So it's going to blend in with your background a little bit. And like I had mentioned before, once we varnish, it does disappear. You know, the little hint of it is not enough to worry about, especially once we start painting over top. It's my magic eraser. It's really kind of cool. Some of you probably aren't quite as anal as me. I can drive myself nuts. These little things. There we go. See? Go on. How cool is that? So basically it's gone. It will come back a little bit, but it's going to be a hint of blue. So we're just going to like let that dry for a second. And while that's drying, we're going to get our pattern ready. And I've drawn out my pattern. This one's kind of my play pattern because I had a few different things. You know, I was at one time I was going to put a spider here. So that's another idea too. Like if you don't want to do the clock, you don't have the clockworks, you just want to get all Halloweeny and spooky. There is so many different things that you could do down here. You know, add an old Halloween fence. You could add spiders, bats. I had originally was going to put a big spider down here. You could have a bat. You could have a whole big, you know, wooden bat, paint them up, decoupage them. Any number of fun little things that you can do. So we do have our pattern. And we're also going to want white graphite paper because, well, you could use black. White's just going to show up because on texture, when you transfer your design, it doesn't show up very well. So just give that a second. Maybe we'll just wave it around. Just we'll wave it around. Get it dry a bit quickly. There we go. Takes a second. So we're going to trace our design on. Quickly do that. White graphite. You're going to find actually when you do, and I like to just use a small ratty old piece, but this guy, all we want to start with is his hat. Right up there. And we get our stylus out, wherever we put that. Nasty old stylus. Use a bigger end. You can even go bigger than this one. This one's kind of my little small one, which I use for everything, even has paint on it. If you use a bigger end on the texture and a little bit more pressure, with any luck, we'll see the pattern come through. Nope, not working. Okay, so we're going to try the ruler. If all else fails, go to the ruler. A little bit more pressure. Yeah, even got my paper right side out. A little bit more pressure. There. So it is very, very light, and you can see it. So as long as you have a guideline, this isn't a transfer for you know, detail purposes. It's just going to be a guide as to where we're going to block in some color. Once we get the color blocked in, everything we do from that point on is relatively easy to transfer on. It'll trace on quite well for your facial features, that sort of thing. Very good. I found a ruler worked great for this. Get my little lines on. Use a bigger end, and you won't tear your paper because we do have to use a little bit more pressure. If you're finding it really hard to do, worst case scenarios, you can kind of put some indicators on here and draw it in with a white chalk pencil if that's what you're comfortable doing. You could get a brand new piece of that heavy duty black. Leaves the finger marks that we all hate. You could always use that. That will work. I just prefer all my pieces of graphite paper, transfer paper, to be fairly light. I do not like dark lines when I'm painting because I tend to forget to erase them. And this actually gives me nice straight lines too. Normally I don't like straight lines, but I do like my lines to be clean. And we'll take this right up to the edge. Let's see. Time to peek. Oh yeah, there's almost enough. I missed a little spot. We'll get a little bit more down in here. The joys of the pressure. Okay. So if all else fails and it's not working, just to humor everybody, I'm going to try my ratty old piece of black. See if that works. This is actually fun because if you see everybody paint on texture and they make it seem so easy, painting on texture is awesome. It's very forgiving. You almost can't make a floating mistake, but you can't transfer onto it. It takes a little bit extra work. Also, a reminder here too is where I'm actually trying to do this part of the hat is where I did get the transfer medium, and that for some reason does not like to be traced over top of. So let's see how that works. Ew. So I had a few lines. Cut. So it is a little bit tricky. You do have to scrub a little bit harder. It's actually really hard. Where the texture medium was, or the transfer medium was, your surface is really hard, so you actually can press a little bit harder. So I actually had to do that around the designs. I actually almost had to scrub it in, like put a little bit of pressure, check it a couple of times, you know, keep your finger down, lift it. And I am getting my faint lines coming up, which is what I needed to see. Just enough that I know where my project's going to be. Same things, get her little face in here, her neck, and her body. I'm not going to worry about, you know, this sort of neck design thing that she's got. I just want the face, the hat, and her hair, so I know where her hair is going to be. Put that in there. Okay, so we've got her traced on. I'll put that aside for now. I don't know if you can actually see this very well, but there is a very, very faint line where her body and stuff is. So it's very light, just enough that we're going to actually see it. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to float around it. And I float around everything before I paint. It's just one of those strange little things that I do. It adds depth. And one of the things that I need is my magic sauce, which is my DecoArt Easy Float. I cannot do anything without this stuff. I love it. And I'm not even shy with it. I put a lot in my water, like 5 or 6 drops into each. So I'll put that in my water, even in the dirty side, don't care. I love it because it just has a way of just conditions the water just enough that I have a few extra minutes of playtime. So when I float, I like to use my angular shaders. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch angular shader for this one. These are my black gold Dynasty. I love these brushes. Workhorses. And I'm very hard on my brushes. Badly hard on my brushes. So these are what I like to use. So we're going to take Payne's Gray and we're going to shade around the entire outside of the piece, following those little white lines that you did. So get some paint, blend it in. So starting from the top, way up here, just going to float, following the line, and it's actually going to help bring that line back out for me to see as well. I do float and I do pity pat. I love my pity pat. Love my little mops. Just a quick little pity pat, like so. So you see the line now. And the nice thing is what I do if I actually am teaching, is I like to do this with my students because it actually gives them a chance to get comfortable with the floating. Because when I paint, I float everything 2-3 times. I'm not a heavy floater to start with, and that's sort of why I sort of started doing all my floating that way. And to get the darker, then I discovered that I preferred to layer my colors to really bring out sort of a richer look to the colors. You see how now we can actually see where those lines are? And I pull towards me, so I'm going to turn my piece around and pull back the other way. Get that hat in there, starting from the tip, floating. I love floating. You know, a lot of people, when I teach classes and stuff, it was really funny because the floating is the F word. We don't say that word out loud. It's like, oh my God, we're going to float. I love to float. I don't know what it is. I just love the look of it. So continue floating around your entire design and we'll see where we go from there. So getting ready to base coat now. We're actually going to start by base coating the hat. And as you can see, all the shading, I just went around the entire design. It's just going to bring it out. Allow you a little bit of definition. Oops, because they're it's a weird little setup that I have here. So we've got it defined. So now we're just going to base coat, and then we're actually going to go back later and we play around and define it and stuff. You can also see that this is toned down a little bit, so we're not even going to worry about it. And then I'm going to show you with once we have the lamp black, a few things that we can do. So get out your lamp black. I have mine by the keg. Use it for everything. I use it a lot of times if I don't know what I want to paint on something and I've got a surface. I find if I paint it black, it just takes on a whole different life form, so we can actually look at it in a different way. Just sort of one of the things that sort of helps me. So we're going to start by just base coating his entire hat, solid black, one coat. Here, through the magic of video, we actually have finished painting our little black. When I paint him, I use my chisel edge quite often to get nice flat lines. You can use tape if you prefer, whatever it works to get them done. So now what we're going to do is he's painted that. We're actually going to do the face, and the face is going to be antique green. So throw a coat of antique green on the face, and we're also going to do burnt orange. He's upside down again. Burnt orange for the hair. So we're going to get those painted up now. Just one coat, I just base coat everything in one coat first, just to sort of get a feel for where the whole design is going to go. I do a lot of my stuff in layers, so if I'm going to paint something over top, I still base coat one coat first. So we're going to get his little face painted, her little face. Then she's going to start staring at us, so let's get that painted. So we've got the green coat on, now we're working on the orange. And you may be finding with the texture, it is a little bit forgiving, but it's also a little bit harder to base coat. So I tend to just kind of work my brush in small bits, a little different than I would on a normal flat surface, and just kind of let it tap in my my points and my ends, because you want it into all the little grooves, because it's a base coat. So I'm just popping it in there. Working a lot off my chisel. I know we all have our own little ways of painting. There's no right or wrong, really, on how you get your color on your piece. But I find because the texture, I need to kind of work the paint in. So I can't just do like nice, smooth little strokes. And I use my chisel a lot. Get my shape in there. This is kind of fun doing the video. It's kind of like when I used to watch those cooking shows, and by the magic of television, you'd watch all the prep, and then they'd put it in the oven, and like 10 seconds later, it pops back out. It's kind of like painting and putting everything to video. Taking me forever to base coat, but all you see is it takes me just seconds. So there. So we've got our first coat of everything on there. The green, we're going to do a second coat. We're also going to do a second coat on the hair as well. But what I wanted to go to was the bottom part of the dress. It is black. I painted mine black, and then we're just going to use a little scrapbook paper and put a ruffle on. So at this point you can decide. You can actually scrapbook paper her dress if you prefer. I had some fun ones, the papers that we were using. You could use this one for her dress if you wanted to, and kind of put that on there. There was some different ones. Kind of fun if you wanted to. I've been debating doing her dress with some Halloween spider web paper. Basically anything's at your choice. You could have a lot of fun, and there's nothing stopping you even. Here was another thing I had actually considered at this point too, was cutting her hair out of scrapbook paper. Now wouldn't that be fun? Doing her hair in scrapbook paper if you found something orange and wanted to have fun. There's really no things that you can't do here. I'm just going to paint mine again with the lamp black, and then we're going to scrapbook paper in her ruffle on her dress. So we're going to finish this up with lamp black. Okay, so we've got it all base coated. We are getting ready to do our details, but what we're going to do now is actually, because as you well know, we've all been working upside down, and that's basically the way I could get my everything set up at this point in time. But what I'm going to do now, before I start working on all the details and all the fun little things, is I'm going to attempt to get ourselves turned around so that you can watch me work the right way. It really doesn't matter. I mean, I'm working upside down for all the details and stuff like that. I mean, it really has been irrelevant, but I'm going to attempt to get us turned around and see what happens. Alright, so now we've got hopefully going in the right direction, just so you can watch better idea with all my floating and stuff like that. So we're actually going to trace on the pattern, and it is actually going to go a lot better this time around because we are tracing directly onto, a regular painted surface. So what I want to do is just want to get her eyes on and her hairlines in with our white graphite paper, of course. slide that under there. And see, notice I'm using just a small piece. I don't want to have a great big piece to have to fight with. I want to be able to see where it is, what it's doing. And our stylus. So what I want to do is I just want to get her little nose shape in, like so, and her eye. There, get her little eye in. And her hairlines, because we're going to do all our little shading and stuff. And she needs a chin. She has a chin. Press a little bit heavier. Okay, so that's all we need. And what I do normally is I do shading, dry brush, shade, dry brush, and then an additional highlight if required. So what we're going to do actually is we're going to shade this with evergreen. Get our first float in with evergreen, just on her face right now, working on. And our 1/2" angle shader, as before. Get that done. I just love the way it always starts to come to life, just by working with layers and playing with color. So to start, we're going to go around her eyes. Around her eyes. I do turn my piece around a lot when I shade, so we're going to do that. Just get all around her eyes here. And get out my trusty little mop. Give her a little pity pat. Just softens the floats, because I do pity pat in a pity pat motion. I find that I can get little lines on occasion, but I just pat them out and then they're fine. Softens them. And around the outside of the nose. So again, turn my piece around. Are you still on there? I think you are. And just under her nose. Pop her little nose in. Okay. Pat, 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 pat. Under her chin. She's got to have a chin. There. And then I bounce around, because I don't want to go over any areas that are already wet. So I do bounce around. So now I'm going to pick a different spot where I haven't been. And I'm going to, let's see, go up the side of her face. And because I'm doing, I know it doesn't necessarily mean anything by the way I do my floating, it's because I build it up in layers. I darken shading as I go with my other colors. Make sure she's staying in here, my new setup. I start by creating sort of my own little ideas on what I think dimension is. So get that, and then let's see, we'll go up the side of her neck. And let's see. Should be able to go over here now. Pop along there under her hat. There. Oh, and we'll do under her little chin here. That way you can see it. Under her little chin. Pat that out. Okay, so that's the first float. And now we're going to go through and we are going to take burnt umber, or burnt sienna, sorry. We take burnt sienna and we're going to shade her hair. Get the first float in on her hair. Get that in there. I just love watching these things come to life. You start off with something, just a blank canvas, and the fun thing is how it does start to come to life. So her hair. In most of my instructions, you'll see that at the beginning it says I shade around everything before I paint, and this is what I do. And when I talk about, you know, the first float on something, it's the same idea. We're creating around here. Get that back in there. I'm going to walk off camera here quite a bit, I know I am. Just pop that in there. First floats I don't care about. I don't want them strong. I don't want tons of color. And what happens with the first float as well is if you do make mistakes, or it's, you know, you get water lines or it's messy or whatever, you get to float over it a second time with another color. You get to dry brush your color. There's any number of things that we get to do. Okay, so now I'm going to pop in her hairlines. her hair separations in. It's just like going around the outside of the piece. We're just sort of defining some areas that we're going to work with. And her other hairline. Pat that down there. Right now it's wet, so you can't really see the color, but when it dries, you can see the color. So you don't sit there and go over it. The darker shadows are this darker shading is what's going to make these colors come out in the end anyway. This is just for defining. There. Okay, that was fun. So I moved things around again, and that way it's a little bit easier for you to see everything that I'm doing. So anyways, we've floated our first float. So now we're going to actually dry brush the face, and I'm going to start by layering a second coat, dry brushing it on with avocado dip. So we're going to do that. Get that on there. That's where our handy dandy rag comes in handy. And we're going to pick up, and I use my Dynasty Series 200 dry brush dome rounds. I use them a lot. I use them for everything, for the smaller pieces that I do. I like them because you can actually use them on their sides. You can use them straight up and down. You can stipple with them. There's basically any number of things that you can do. So because of this, the dry brushing, because I do use it on its side, so I'm actually going to just put it on and just lightly, almost rouge it, like just lightly dry brush. I don't want to cover the whole piece. I just want to add a little highlight. And not where I've shaded though, so I'm going to stay away from where I've done my shading. And just dry brush that, and it just picks up, just like we did the background, starts to pick up a little bit of color. I do start softly and then build up pressure. That way, you know, if there's too much paint, you're not going to get, you know, a bunch of paint on your piece. And just kind of rub it, scrub it. Don't use the brush straight up and down though, that's when you actually get holes. So you always use it on its side. See? And her little face just starts to come to life just a little bit. So start with that. And this, we're not even going to clean this brush, we're just going to sit it aside. Once again, these brushes stay dry, because this is a dry brushed. So we're going to sit this brush down for now, and we're going to go back to our 1/2 inch angle shader, and we're going to float our second float over top and darken everything with black green. And with that will help make everything sort of pop out, come together. So we'll do that. Oops, my water was dirty. Okay, black green. So this is where we're actually going to define more for spots. So we're going to come up the side. You see what I did there? Put that out of the way. Get my mop, mop it softly, and pick up the next. And I think we'll go, let's go under the hat. Define that up there. A little mopping. And keep going again. You know, sometimes I do this, I'll do another coat of the darker after, just because if I'm not 100% happy. Go around the nose, darken that. Pounce that out. Now she's got this awesome little beaky nose. Let's come under the eye. Make her eye stand out a little bit more. Underneath. And because we're moving around, let's see. Oh, we got to come up her little face again. Up here. You have to have sound effects when you do this, I find. I don't know why, I just do. And we're going to come under her chin. Make that pop out a little bit. Pounce that. And up in here, I just think it's kind of fun to create a bit more of a shadow building down. So I'm going to actually just walk this float down a little bit. Angle it out. Just to give her a little bit more depth under her hat. Same in this corner once it dries. Just going to walk that float out a little bit. darker, pitty pat. And we'll just do under here where her neck is with dark green again. There's really not much to the process that I use. It's very, very messy style of painting, very easy style of painting. And once we can get up here, blow on a little bit, we will go to the top of her eye. And if you notice, I'm shading around everything before I put in all my detail. I'm going to move her a bit. Because I like to have the floating underneath everything. I don't like it if I have to clean up my floats. There. Look, she's got one eye. She's kind of creepy. Isn't that fun? So we'll zoom in. Give a zoom in a little bit just to give you an idea of what her face is starting to look like. Oops, going the wrong way. Over there. She's got a hollow, creepy eye. Isn't that cool? Yeah, we don't want to look at that for too long, so we'll go back out. Okay, so then we're going to do, clean off my brush. I ruined my brush. We're going to go to a lighter color yet. We're actually going to go, this is one of my favorites. This is Margarita green. We'll love this color. So we're going to pop these highlights out a little bit more with another coat of dry brushing. So using the same dirty brush, because we're going lighter, take that, scrub a little bit off on my paper towel, and we're going to come back and we're going to highlight again. In this case, I tend to do smaller areas where she's more likely to pick up a little bit more light. Up there, your cheeks, up over in here, maybe around her chin a little bit. Just a little bit. Got her nose. And see, it helps to create the shadows around her eyes when I do this as well. I'm not going anywhere on the top of her head. Just enhancing. Sort of darker in here. And there. So there, she's got an awesome green face now. So you can actually wash this brush now because we're actually done with it in the greens. So I'm going to clean that. But what we're going to do is we're going to brighten her nose with a float of the Margarita green. And sometimes I might go back afterwards when it's all finished and brighten a few highlights here and there, like I might pop in a few more. Once I've got everything in, it gives me a better idea. I'm going to turn her upside down, paint her nose. You're getting used to me being upside down, pretty sure of it. And then we just kind of pop in her crooked little nose there. Her nose is awesome. It's so crooked. Okay, and I think we'll put a little bit on her chin. Brighten her chin up a little bit. Soften. There. So that's her face. And now we're going to go on and work on her hair a bit more. So her hair, the first float was burnt orange. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get another dry brush because I have several of them. You can never have too many of these things. We get them dirty. So I have so many. And then I have bath day where I clean them. It's really quite exciting. So we're going to go to a brighter color. And because I did burnt orange, and you see my tones start to get lighter as we go. So we're going to do a little, what color did I pick? A little Tangelo orange to brighten my hair up a little bit. Same dry brushing technique. Like that. Same thing on its side. Pick up the paint. And you can see now why I like using texture. Texture just, for dry brushing, texture is so fun. Same paper towel, cloth, whatever. Make sure your cloth isn't wet too, that's very important. Okay, so our little hair. And the first dry brush on the hair, you know, sometimes depending on your color, doesn't show up all that well. Just brightens it up a little bit. Pick up a little bit more. Take some off. And because this is a narrow area, I'm doing it more in a back and forth. So scrubbing my highlights. some off here. And this is what I do too, like in my classes, if I have students, you know, we do get tendency to get those dirty floats that we all just hate and get traumatized by. Instead of dry brushing the lighter color, dry brush your background color over it a little bit. It will actually clean up some of those lines, which is kind of like my little painting tip. I am a messy painter. I've been known to do it. Because, you know, your painting should be fun. You shouldn't be all pinched up. If it's messy, it's messy. Okay, so I've brightened up her hair the first go around. It's easier just to do that. You see a little bit, the light maybe. Brightened up. And then we are going to go back with our angle shader and we're going to shade the next darker color, which is russet.